Hello, and welcome to another episode of RacketCast. It's the only podcast from Racket. This week, you are joined not just by myself and my colleague Jay Baller, but by several of our esteemed compatriots over at Wedge Live. I would love to ask them to introduce themselves. Wedge Live team, please tell our listeners who you are.
I am John Edwards, the anchor, managing editor, publisher of Wedge Live.
And I'm Jason Garcia, the hot dog Larry Jacobs of Wedge Live.
I'm Taylor Darlene. I'm the highest ranking unpaid employee, aka Debbie in sales.
It is crucial for everyone at home to know that Jason is dressed as a hot dog right now. The audio format really takes away from that, and we apologize for that, but definitely dressed as a hot dog. And we had Wedge Live on under the premise of we wanted to recap the year in politics of Twin Cities politics with them, a group of folks that pays more attention than just about anyone. And in preparation, we asked them to outline just a handful of the biggest, most interesting, most important, most talkable stories that happened over the past, 11.1 months right now. And we're going to tee it off with, number one, Minneapolis' war on the unhoused. And, of course, you'll remember that Mayor Jacob Frey, during his first campaign, pledged to end homelessness within 5 years. That did not happen. And when I think of his approach to the issue, I'm reminded of one of my favorite podcast citations, Needed, a media criticism podcast, which had an episode titled The Squishy Liberal Euphemisms Big City Dem Mayors Used to Sell Criminalizing Homelessness. And that's kind of how, in my mind, I encapsulate the Frey approach. But I want to kick it to the Wedge crew. Tell us about the year in a war on the unhoused.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious, even if you're not one of the people who spends a lot of time wrapped up in media, and especially local politics media like us, that Jacob Frey's approach to dealing with unhoused people has been to just use whatever resources are available to make their lives more miserable. You know, there's constant sweeps going on. This year we saw the fun escalation of not only seeing encampments being bulldozed, but then having city vehicles show up to dump literal tons of concrete rubble into vacant lots and things like that to try to make sure that nobody could come back. You know, we've also seen Jacob Frey showing up to use unhoused people as scapegoats for violence that's occurring in the city and things like that. So really, I think I would personally encapsulate his strategy as capitulation to business interests rather than human interests. And I think that's been sort of the direction we've seen him going over the past couple of years, really since the pandemic.
I think what gets twisted in the conversation is that, first of all, nobody wants to live near an encampment. Nobody wants that in their neighborhood. Like, there's a lot of legitimate complaints from people who live in neighborhoods, often working class neighborhoods with people of color, about the encampments in their neighborhood. And Jacob Frey's approach, in addition to being inhumane, just is not working for those people either. Moving people from block to block isn't satisfying the concerns of the people who have to live with an encampment in their neighborhood. And I'm just really hoping that can break through in the debate we're going to have about electing the next mayor in 2025.
Yeah, the Star Tribune a while ago, was it Susan Dew who did that piece about how most of the encampments have been within like these several block radii, like they don't, it's like you dump everyone's stuff, you kick them out of one lot and they go somewhere else because people have nowhere else to go. It's like this just constant shuffling around of humans who have nowhere else to be.
And what I've noticed is Jacob Frey has shown up at press conferences at the site of violent, deadly shootings near encampments to complain with an indignant tone that would give you the impression he is not entirely in charge of the city's encampment response. He's not entirely in charge of the city's police department. I just feel like that the debate is getting twisted as if he's standing up to the city council who has no power over encampments, and it's very frustrating for me to listen to it and watch it and have it not break through.
Yeah, speaking of guys in hot dog costumes, we're all trying to find the guy who did this.
Yes.
Well, and one thing that also, like, you see is that in trying to like attack homeless people, they're just making the city worse for literally everybody. I mean, the issue of you go down Franklin Avenue in Ventura Village and, they've got these fences that are blocking the entire medians. And what that means is you can't safely cross that street because that used to be like a place you could cross the street, wait for the cars, and then get across. Now it's just completely unsafe to cross there. And they've also, on Franklin Avenue, put up the fences blocking off sidewalks so people are in the street. And, just getting rid of benches, all these little things that they're doing to take away to like try to punish homeless people that end up making the city worse for every single person here.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Simpsons episode where the homeless person's turned into a mailbox, and that's the solution. Just pretend they're not there, sweep them under the rug, and it's deeply inhumane and shows a huge lack of creativity in coming up with literally any solution other than just really awful sweeps of encampments.
Yeah, the sweeps themselves are also just like difficult to watch. Like you watch it and it's like how can no one be trying harder to solve this situation? It breaks your heart.
The thing, Council President Elliot Payne has mentioned this, like Hennepin County is recognized as doing homelessness response exceptionally well, like a nation leader. And his comment on that is we should be very depressed by that fact, because if we in Hennepin County are doing so well, imagine the state of other cities.
Yeah, there was a Washington Post story yesterday about how Hennepin County is a leader, and to your point, yeah, fucking yikes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fucking
And along with that, we see so many of when these sweeps happen, it's not just MPD, it's not just transit police, it's not just parks police, it is also Hennepin County sheriffs, it's also state troopers, state agencies that are involved in this. And to reference another meme, it's like all of the Spider-Men pointing at each other.
Yes.
No, it's you're supposed to fix this, you're supposed to fix this,
Right.
rather than anybody actually trying to collaborate to fix things. We just get this very stopgap and piecemeal approach to moving unhoused people around, destroying their property, getting rid of their documents, their, whatever they manage to hold on to from sweep to sweep. And, and it isn't also fair to characterize it and say that it's just the mayor, even though he is the one who is in charge. But, you do see council members like Councilmember Vita has been pretty outspoken about homeless encampments and, basically saying that everyone who is in an encampment is an addict and things like that really are also very harmful to the people who live in that situation. Given the economy that we live in, the vast majority of us are within 2 paychecks of not being able to afford a place to live. And it's just really depressing that we continue to use unhoused people as this sort of public piñata to bat around, to make people look tough on crime or to make them look good to the business community by saying, we're standing up to them, to the people with the absolute least power in our system.
Yeah, Jason,
Yeah.
to your point, to not let anyone off the hook, I mean, you have to consider like the 70-year dismantling and underfunding of public housing is a broader cultural culprit here. But yeah, when your reaction to that is just bullying people with no actual solution in mind, then that's a problem.
Well, and one thing too that, all the people who work with encampments always talk about the fact that when you sweep them, they become unknown to the workers, the support workers. So like you're making it harder for them to eventually get housing by like pushing them around. Like if you want them to not be in encampments, get them housing, but you're making it so much harder by like moving them to another encampment because then these workers can't find these people to keep giving them services.
Yeah. Well, I think that really sums up our first topic. And actually, we did talk a little bit about something else that we wanted to talk about here, story wise, which is the fact that the mayor is in charge, not the only person in charge, but he, after the Strong Mayor ballot initiative a couple of years ago, he is by definition and by power structure stronger than ever, and stronger than really a Minneapolis mayor has ever been. How has that played out over the last couple of years? How are we seeing this, play out in his relationships with the city council? And how do we feel about how the Strong Mayor situation has gone?
I still hate it. So we elected the power on the council flipped in the 2023 election. So we've gone through this year with, instead of a majority full of the mayor's allies, it's been more progressive council members. He's vetoed, I think at least 5 that I can remember. I have the list here somewhere, but recently he vetoed the Labor Standards Board, a thing that he said he was for a couple of years ago. Things are worse in terms of relationships at City Hall than I have ever seen them. Watching things for 10 years, the council wanted to fund the Agate shelter downtown, and which is their right to do, power of the purse, right? It's one of the few powers the council has left. And the mayor's administration was like, no, actually, we don't have the money for this. You were irresponsible in allocating this money. The money doesn't exist. And guess what? We're going to have to defund North Commons Park because of what you did irresponsibly. We find out a couple of weeks later, no, he didn't actually defund North Commons Park. False alarm. He was just doing a stunt. But people hate each other. It's a bad blood. It's not working well. There is no trust.
Yeah, and I think along with that erosion of trust has come kind of an unfortunate inability to even communicate in a reasonable fashion. They're a body of elected individuals from across the city that you often see, kind of this partisan line of the mayor's allies lashing out at people who don't follow their line, talk down to them in particular because they're younger, and kind of treat them like children or something like that. And I feel like with the rise of social media over the past several years, so many more of these meetings are, if not being watched in their entirety, being clipped and shown by news organizations. John makes a lot of hay with this, but I also see it from legacy media. And part of me wonders, like, do people not realize that these things are going to be seen more broadly, or do they just not care because they want to grandstand and they want to make themselves feel better by lashing out at other people and belittling other people and things like that?
Yeah, and the Strong Mayor system has been great for Margaret Anderson Kelleher, who just continues to find gainful employment no matter what.
And Lisa Goodman. Lisa Goodman is back. She's back.
Yeah.
What I'm also frustrated by is we're going to run another election where the mayor blames the council as an obstacle. We're going to do it again. We absolutely are, even though in 2021 we passed the Strong Mayor thing to put him in charge of, in addition to the police department, he already controlled things like encampment response with the regulatory services. Every department in the city now answers to the mayor. Public Works, all of them. There's a long list. And I worry no one will realize this is just an easy game to play. People hate the city council for some reason. It's a easy boogeyman. And I think it might work. I think they're going to run the same play, and it might work again. The idea that Mayor Frey is just being hold me back. It's going to be the hold me back, bro election, where Jacob Frey is like, I would totally solve that, but they're holding me back. And it's upsetting.
He's literally already doing it. There was his op-ed in the Strib yesterday where he was like, in the wake of, man, this thing made my blood boil, but yeah, in the wake of Trump's election, the solution is not to become a radical leftist. The radical left is just as much to blame as the radical right. Like we need
Right.
a centrist city council for these
Mean-
reasons.
Meanwhile, our far left DSA Alliance City Council approved record pay raises for MPD. That's how radical and abolish the police they are.
John,
Yeah.
great transition. We'll hop right along to topic number 3 here. After the murder of George Floyd, we have a fully funded MPD, very lukewarm, if any, reforms done to MPD, and officers are being paid more than ever, even though there aren't, I guess, enough of them is how you could frame it, at least according to the charter. What is the state of MPD in 2024? I know if you are an Alpha News reader, and of course we all are, there have been 2 great documentaries done, fair, impartial, beautiful production value about how they're very, very innocent, very misunderstood, and crucially under attack by everyone politically. Yeah, that's one perspective, but we'd love to hear another on the year in MPD.
I really enjoy the framing of won't somebody please think of these six-figure earners from the suburbs and their saviorism for those of us who live in this Dantean inner city. But in any sort of realistic view, the MPD is operating exactly like it always has. Nothing has changed substantially. Even very moderate reforms that have been floated, like limiting access to using coaching as discipline, have largely been ignored. There's no, if you go back and watch Jacob Fry's last campaign, one of the words that he uses the most is transparency. We have to be transparent. Everything should be transparent to the public. And if anything, I feel like we've lost transparency not with the strong mayor amendment, because so many things that maybe could have been debated in an open council hearing before are now all being done closed doors in the mayor's office by the mayor's handpicked appointees. You know, we lost Cedric and now we have Todrick, and you know, these are people who are making nearly $500,000 each every year. And what do you hear from them? What results do we see from them? None. And that lack of transparency is appalling.
I'm going to say something nice about Mayor Fry. For the first time since 2020, MPD staffing is on the way up. Is going to finish the year higher than when it started. There's an accomplishment there.
Question about like a lot of these officers being like kind of suspect, like a lot of them are like from other, like they got someone from New York State or from other departments where, you know, people who have been a cop have been like, these aren't good transfers, lateral moves. These are usually cops that are a problem.
Part of the Downtown Council's 2035 plan was to expedite police hiring, which I don't know if being less selective about who gets to walk around with a gun is the right approach, but it was for them. I'm going to extend a very unpopular olive branch here, and I just want to say, now that Bob Kroll is no longer anywhere near any lever of power, he has devoted his time to reviewing cheeseburgers online. And you know what?
Really?
Yeah. On an Alpha News YouTube channel. And he's pretty good at it. Like, the man's guilty of a lot in his life, but he can review a cheeseburger all right. And I just had to throw that out there.
I must not be consuming enough social media. Is this like a big thing that I should already know about?
I mean,
I think Jay follows Alpha News's movements much more closely than the average person.
Okay. Is anyone else finding out about this for the first time right now?
Yes.
Okay. I don't feel so bad anymore. I feel like I should have known
Yeah.
this.
I feel like Jay has been keeping this a secret.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
so that he can swoop in on.
Yeah, and
Jay's
if,
just been swooping in on all of these cheeseburgers.
if we need to,
nobody else can get them.
if we need to convene an emergency podcast where we review episodes of Bob's Burger blog,
Yes.
we definitely can.
Racket reacts to Bob Kroll's YouTube channel. Racket reacts.
No. It would be perfect in that Jay and Taylor and John could review the individual episodes, and then Em and I could go and review the burgers and see if he was right.
I think this has potential.
Okay, Bob Kroll, former labor leader. Topic 4 about labor.
Oh, that's great segue, Jay.
Yeah, let's get into
Yeah,
labor.
labor wise, we just did a podcast last week where we awarded the turkeys of the year, the biggest goofs and fuck ups in the Twin Cities over the last 12 months. And one of mine, which I'm sure will be very popular among the people in the industry I cover, was just like blanket statement, the restaurant owners of Minneapolis, like watching the reaction to the labor standards board, this like really outsized outrage that seems in its size and volume to maybe suggest that we do in fact need a labor standards board. The whole thing has been kind of ridiculous to watch. But there's been a lot of labor news in not just in restaurants, although very visibly there over the last 12 months. Yeah, what do you guys feel about labor in 2024?
Well, first I want to say I listened to your podcast about the turkeys of the year, and one of the things that you kind of tipped your hand on was talking about how you wanted to basically shift to all user generated content. And not have to do any of the work yourselves. And then I realized, wait a minute, right after this was when they invited us to come on the pod and do a podcast for them.
Jay, they're on to us.
So very clever, very clever.
We did not promise to pay you anything for this appearance. I need to be very clear about that.
Yeah, this is all just free labor for you. So clearly the rest of the podcast industry needs to unionize to protect our livelihoods. But seriously, one of the things I think that really stands out about this new labor movement has been how much it involves the service industry, and not just restaurants, but also the retail sector, people who work in areas like maintenance, cleaning, and things like that. So it's been really fascinating to see people who, in the scale of our American capitalist society, tend to fall toward the bottom, both in terms of pay and in terms of the respect that they're given, really starting to draw a line and say, no, we demand that we be treated fairly and that we have a seat at the table. And then to your point, it's very disheartening to then see restaurateurs, very visibly, people who have soaked up the limelight and been very eager to accept national awards and praise, closing restaurants at the drop of a hat because they might have to share some of that with their employees.
Have we mentioned the Labor Standards Board as an advisory committee with no power?
Yes.
And I had to watch a story on TV from the local news. I forget which station. Like, the premise was St. Paul would see what's happening in Minneapolis and start their own labor standards advisory committee. St. Paul already has a labor standards advisory committee. Did no one bother to check? And they're talking to like guys at a restaurant in St. Paul, the owner or a manager is like, yeah, I think they might bring it here, and then we might be forced to move. You already have one. You're doing fine. Minneapolis has a labor advisory committee right now. They're just trying to enable them to have like issue area, like sectoral work groups, they call them. I don't understand. David Brower on Blue Sky, which is the only place you can find David Brower now, said like, if we had an adult business mayor, like your standard issue mayor who is tight with the business community, he would go to his business friends and say, chill out, guys. This is toothless. You still have my veto. This is nothing to worry about. But like it's a thing the mayor says he supports, and he's against it now because he wants to have this fight, I guess, or he is so weak that he needs to pander to the business community.
That's what I really don't understand is the 180 from like 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago. He was for this board. This board was great. It had the mayor's backing. To like now he has vetoed it outright. I just don't know.
Sense.
I mean, the big thing that is the sticking point for him is the actual makeup of the board. That there would be 5 business owners, 5 labor representatives, and 5 community representatives. But Jacob Fry wants it to be 5 people who are business owners and 5 people who are labor. And then any sort of recommendation has to get a 2/3 approval. So business would always have the ability to spike anything before it even got to
So
a recommendation.
So here's the secret. It's already set up in a way to allow business to spike anything because you need at least one, the way the council's proposal read, you need at least one employer member to sign off before it can move forward. It's called a tripartite majority. So one employee, at least one employee, one community stakeholder, and one employer member would have to sign off for it to move forward. And then you still got to get it through the council, and then you still got to get it past a mayoral veto. It's I really don't understand the uproar.
Yeah, the fact that these are recommendations, it could not be a more just like tepid sort of just inclusive gesture to people who work for a living. And someone pointed this out online, but just to demonstrate how just like shook business owners are to a like core power balance level. I think Anoka Chamber of Commerce signed that big letter in support of it. So they're really rallying the troops from everywhere, even outside of Minneapolis, to entrench the status quo of not having anyone other than a business owner recommend anything about a business, which, wow.
Yeah, I mean, there was, I think the furthest one away that I saw was from near St. Cloud. And yeah, and I guess the other really disappointing part of this, and no offense, J and M, but is the credulity that media gives to these sort of complaints. The fact that it's just like, oh yeah, look, 400 people signed these, and it's like, yeah, 400 signatures, but many of them are from different parts of the state. In some cases, it's like 3 or 4 people from the same business. These aren't like a huge swath of people signing. If I feel like with even my limited Twitter following, I could get 400 individuals to sign just about anything.
As an thought experiment, when we drop this podcast, we'll see how many signatures we can get. Just a random document. But yeah, I mean, it really is. And John, to your point, like TV news has been maybe the biggest culprit of this, like the just wildly hyperbolic language, like this will change the landscape of business in Minneapolis. No, it won't do that.
Yeah. And like one of the other things that Jacob Fry has brought up multiple times is like, oh, we're hearing from all of these concerned business owners. And if you drew a Venn diagram of these concerned business owners and the concerned business owners from 2016 who were discussing a raise of the minimum wage, it would be a fucking circle.
Yep.
Sorry, I don't know if I can swear on your podcast.
You can.
But yeah, it's all the same people, and it's all the same people who talk about how they were going to move out of the city and the city was going to force them to relocate. And guess what? They're all still right here, still complaining, still stomping their feet and throwing tantrums to get their way.
Well, can I intro the next segment? Can I read the intro?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we ready? Are we ready to go on to the next one?
Mhm.
Go.
Okay. Loathing and
you're off to a
mistrust at City
terrible
Hall. The fracturing and splintering and newly forming loyalties inside City Hall is taking on a real Game of Thrones ass complexion. We've got at least 4 mayoral candidates. We've got a council that has members who seem to actually actively dislike one another publicly. We've got a mayor who's vetoing the living hell out of every progressive measure that comes across his desk. Make it make sense. Taylor?
Make it make sense.
Yeah, make it make sense.
To be,
I
to be
can't.
clear, John was was reading a pre-written thing we had, and then very unfairly put Taylor on the spot at the end, which we did not do.
Well, and I'm reading what Jason's typing in there right now.
Taylor, just give us your recollection of the most Game of Thrones ass moments on the city council this year.
I've never seen Game of Thrones, so I don't get the reference. I don't know. You know, it's just like, I mean, Vita, I think, is the biggest example of this, like, problem of just wanting to feud and not do anything. Like I feel like her role on council now is just to like sow confusion, to show up and be like, I don't know what's going on, what's happening, and to obstruct things. And, you know, she's just the most frustrating for me too, because I know she's going to win. Like, we're stuck with her. Maybe someone who's seen Game of Thrones can give a better answer.
I guess I would say that to kind of piggyback off of what Taylor was saying, maybe the most Game of Thrones moment was when Councilmember Vita was invited to sit in on a committee meeting and spent her time in a lengthy diatribe lashing out at Councilmember Chavez, who chairs that committee, ranting about the fact that they had asked questions of city staff and she felt they were putting them on trial or something like that. And it kind of ended with her telling Council President Payne, don't come down here by me, and saying, like, I said what I said, you can shut off my microphone or tell me to stop, but I'm not going to stop. And then arguing with people in the chamber who were there from the community. And I feel like it would have been very fitting in a Joffrey Baratheon throne room scene to have him just ranting and yelling at other people.
It was the weirdest and wildest thing, the way we started off the year with Latricia. And I think it may be related to the power dynamic shifting, a new majority. She got shut out of any committees. She basically got nothing under the new council, which was unusual. And I think she was just bent out of shape over that.
Yeah, remember how, I mean, to further the Game of Thrones narrative in that sense, remember how around that time there were all of the rumors that Jeremiah Ellison was kind of like secretly teaming up with her, and like have her allies on council back him to be council president and her as council vice president. You know, that I don't know the veracity of that. I just remember seeing and hearing that in multiple places.
I do remember that. That would have been a disaster. Her in a leadership position would have been a disaster. And there are also rumors about her running for mayor. Also, I think that would be a disaster. And that's luckily
That might be
I
kind
don't
of
think that's
fun,
happening.
though.
Yes, of course, it would be fun.
Yes.
It'd be fun
Yes.
for podcasters.
Yeah, for team content, that would be fun. But I think John doesn't have enough time for us to do all of the podcasts that would necessitate.
It would really be a full-time job at that point for you all.
It's dangerous to like romanticize norms and decorum and all that stuff, but like it really does erode just generally, I think, faith in a body when there's that amount of squabbling and disagreement and mistrust, and just not really good for anyone.
Then it serves the interest of painting the city council as this dysfunctional body. Even if you're a member of the body, if you oppose what the majority is trying to do, just raise a ruckus, make it look chaotic, and like this body is capable of nothing but dysfunction. And maybe it helps the mayor get reelected.
Yeah, and I think that's something that with all of Minneapolis and their communications and their campaigning for Jacob Fry and his entire wing of the DFL, I think one of the things that they really do work to obfuscate is the fact that city council is elected, just like the mayor. They come from smaller constituencies, but they all win by much larger percentages of their vote than the mayor does. People vote for progressive council members because they want to see progressive action taken. And in the meantime, you have these people who are very beholden to business, particularly landlords, the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association, and so on, acting as though they're this fringe minority, when in fact they represent majorities across the majority of wards in our city. You know, nobody gets painted as more dangerous than Jason Chavez and Robin Wansley. And look at how much they won their last elections by. Nobody
Not even
Yeah.
close.
yeah, nobody even ran against Wansley because
Yeah.
they knew that they were going to get slapped down. So it's such a, again, the legacy media really goes along with this framing of saying like, oh, the city council is just this out of touch minority body, but nobody addresses the fact that majorities of us across the city are electing them to do this job. They tell us exactly what they want to do when they run. They're not hiding. They're not telling us we're going to solve homelessness in 5 years and then going back on that. They're doing what they said they would do, and that's why they got all these votes.
Yeah, people generally like their council member, but hate the city council like any legislative body.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've referenced kind of the ideological fear mongering a couple times, which is a great segue to our next topic, which is all of Minneapolis, who were recipients of, if you listen to our last episode of Racketcast, they won one of the Turkey of the Year awards, which you don't want that. It's a terrible thing to win, but they got it. And all of Minneapolis, for those who didn't listen to the last episode or just don't know, is a group that portrays anyone left of center on council as being a frothing Marxist who wants to kind of tear apart the very fabric of this city that we love via far left ideas and wacky ideology. What was all of Minneapolis all about in 2024? Going to kick it to Wedge Live.
In 2024, they were all about painting the city council as a DSA aligned majority. Emily Koski joined the DSA in 2024, we found out, because she stopped voting with Mayor Fry. I don't know what is socialist about Emily Koski. I think she would vigorously deny any connections to socialism. But it's, the DSA aligned council majority, a majority of the members of that majority are just not DSA, not socialist at all. So, and really, it's about setting up the mayor's reelection campaign, which will rely, we've mentioned this, heavily on attacking socialism, going after people for wanting to defund the police, which has not happened and is not going to happen. And, doing things like the wild and wacky labor standards advisory board.
You mentioned Jacob Fry's op-ed earlier, and one of the things that he mentioned about Omar Fateh is that he wants to remove the MPD from the city charter. And this is, a debate that has been going on for years about whether or not there should be a prescribed number of officers in the charter. And around the time of the Strong Mayor Amendment, you may remember there was also another attempted charter amendment to remove that. And Jacob Fry at the time was very insistent that, oh no, we don't need a charter amendment. We can just do that. And of course, that's gone nowhere because over the past several years, Jacob has become more and more entrenched with the All of Minneapolis group, which John back in 2021 was calling the Mayor's PAC. And I did a pretty lengthy Twitter thread of who a lot of the big time donors were to All of Minneapolis at the time. And you saw a lot of people from like Kelly Doran, the Pohlads, a lot of people who just come from very wealthy families and have family foundations and things like that. And then, of course, you see like the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association being very involved. Somehow, a bunch of us ended up on their email list. So we, have been getting their emails, and they've just gotten sort of increasingly unhinged throughout the year, blaming everything on the city council. Like John mentioned, claiming that at one point, they didn't even say DSA aligned. They referred to them as the DSA majority. And Karen Birkland is the person who at least signs all of these emails. So I don't know. They also, I don't know if this is really germane, but after Josh Martin tweeted some things talking about how inaccurate their emails were, they removed him from their email list so that he would no longer get them.
Don't
And
worry,
pretty-
someone is forwarding him the emails now. He still gets them to fact check. To give listeners an idea of the scope of their involvement, and it's really unprecedented, the level of outside money that is pouring into city elections in Minneapolis now. So in 2017, there was a group, I forget what the name was. They spent about $200,000 on that
Operation Safety
election.
Now.
No, it was a different group, but like similar makeup of downtown interests, developers and like conservative DFL types. And so we went from 200,000 in 2017 to 2.3 million in 2021 from all of Minneapolis. And they spent another 700,000 in the city council only 2023 election. So it's really, we've had a big jump in the amount of like conservative business interests flooding into city elections. Like, it's not normal. This is a change.
Well, and the thing is too, that's important to note is that there's like direct coordination with the mayor. All of Minneapolis are getting private meetings with him now. And that's how we know who's behind all of Minneapolis. People did a Freedom of Information request and got the names of everyone who is on the leadership board now. So like we know who's behind it. They're to me, they're kind of like, they remind me a lot of like the Operation Safety Now groups from like 2020, which were just these makeups of like, I don't, just like concerned like business people, and they all tried to have an influence in elections, a lot of money. And there was, I think, also with that group, some kind of direct coordination with the mayor as well. So it's like all of Minneapolis is just kind of like continuing this. I think one reason that standards have maybe gone a bit downhill this year is because they lost, I don't know how to say her name, Layla Fateh.
I think she was the mayor's comms person in 2021. So in some
Yeah.
of the videos, maybe even the one where he's saying the mayor's in charge, I think she might be the person interviewing the mayor. Like, she went from his campaign to running all of Minneapolis.
Yeah, and she is the principal at Apparatus, which is also, where Joe Radinovich has been working as a consultant. Obviously, Joe is the mayor's campaign manager who will log into Twitter and go on rants about things and get into people's replies and muck things up for a day or two here or there. And also, he's been the campaign manager for Don Samuels the past couple runs. So you kind of get a picture of how all of these campaigns are so tightly connected. They all used to office out of the same floor downtown where Jacob Fry's wife worked, I believe. They're just like all of these people kind of working out of the same office, and somehow they're not looked at as this sort of weird shadowy group who are working to undermine everything, but it's instead council members who are not actually part of even the DSA, being basically accused of being communists.
One of my favorite minor stories of the year related to all of Minneapolis, I think Lily, I apologize if I'm saying her name incorrectly, didn't someone post an email that she wrote to them explaining she left all of Minneapolis because she disagrees with the direction they've gone? All of Minneapolis went too far for the Fry campaign staffer who started it.
Yeah, and she said something to the effect of how now that she's had a chance to look back on it, there are things that she regrets, but none of it was really spelled out what it was. It was just basically it was a message sent to her by her for the express purpose of disavowing that she was still behind all of Minneapolis.
Racket and Wedge Live are in competition to get Lily, if that's how you say her name, on a future episode for that interview.
Man, that would be. Jay's already drafting an email. I can see it in his eyes.
I mean, she did tell the person, she was like, wow, no one's ever asked me this before.
Yeah.
Crazy.
She's eager to tell her story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and she is also, I believe, still a member of the Met Council, which she was appointed to. She's one of the mayor's appointees.
Interesting. Well,
So, if you're a friend of Jacob Fry's, you're good for getting appointed to at least a six-figure salaried position.
and speaking of friends of the mayor, that does lead us into our seventh and penultimate topic here. If you are getting exhausted of listening to us ramble at home.
And speaking of the mayor, and speaking of outside money just being fire hosed into our town, the next
Yeah,
topic, of course.
exactly. We had another depressing campaign from our friend Don Samuels this year. Another failed run at Ilhan, and another, centrist, biz-friendly coalition failure. I guess I don't know. This like we'll just run Don again thing doesn't appear to be working. Doesn't appear to be resonating with voters. But well, let's talk about it.
I want him to appear on the ballot next time as Donegan Samuels, like Bob again. That's all I have to say about Don Samuels. I don't want to drag this out. It was very sad and depressing and very predictable how it ended. But Jason, you love this topic.
Oh yeah, I mean, to me, it was a much more depressing campaign from him because I felt like maybe somebody was really trying to rope him in and be like, no, we got so close last time. Maybe if you just don't post random poetry online and you don't talk about trying to chase down someone in your underwear, we can win this thing. So not only did we have to suffer through his weird attempt at running for like a city council position, but for Congress, we didn't even get the zaniness that I've come to expect from Don Samuels. It was
We're
just
like Yawn Samuels, if you will.
Heyo.
Come on.
I went there.
It felt very indicative of kind of like national Democrat strategy to me, where you take old failed ideas that almost won an election but definitely lost it and run them back, and that was kind of the
lose it harder.
Yeah. Taylor, do you even have any like key memories from this campaign?
I got kicked out of a press conference by them.
Ooh.
That was pretty good. I went to, because his campaign offices were in Loring Corners, so I went to try to go to this press conference that I was told to try to go to. And Joe Rad just knew who I was. I was like, this is invite only. So they're doing like invite only press conferences, which is kind of telling, honestly, because then I saw the footage from it and it was just like all his supporters. And no, for me, the biggest thing he did that was like really offensive was putting Ilhan on the missing persons flyer. That was just like, because it's like we have the new, she formed that like I think she was part of the newly formed like missing and murdered like for Black women, and just the whole issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And so it was just, he puts her on this flyer and a press conference is held and all these people talk about how offensive this is and all the reasons why, and they just are unrepentant. They're not taking the ad down. They're not going to apologize. So it's just like, I mean, that was just the campaign for me, the Don Samuels one. Just like terrible. And then, Alex Min popping back up for showing up in some chat and saying that he can like work with neo-Nazis. Like, just unreal, the whole campaign. And then they tried to say, oh, he's not part of it. It's like, okay, sure.
Yeah.
Keep bringing Alex Min into their campaign is such an embarrassment.
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint a campaign that he has been a part of that has won in a while now. I mean, I guess if you consider that he's part of that same coterie of people, I guess you would maybe count the mayoral election in 2021. But when you're the son of a former city council member and developer that just has all of the money that you'll ever need, and you can just live popping up and being an annoyance in campaigns for places you don't even live, it's pretty sad to see that that's who this whole wing of the nominal DFL has chosen to align with.
And he did it yesterday. He popped back up yesterday again. So it's like, it's going to happen all year because he's focused on Fry, and then he's also really focused for some reason on Ward 5, even though Ellison has already said he's not going to run. He's still like hitting out at Jeremiah Ellison. It's like, what are you doing? But he's going to be an ongoing issue all next year, I'm sure.
All right, well, I'm going to shoehorn a final transition. Jason mentioned annoying losing elections, and we're going to get to our final topic. And this one really might only be applicable or interesting to people who are brain poisoned by the internet. But you know what? I couldn't help but writing about it this year and scoring, I believe, the first Will Stancil interview. Will Stancil, of course, being a hyper ubiquitous Twitter presence, a lawyer and researcher at the University of Minnesota, whose theory of economic doomerism and how it is flawed was just really rammed home by him, almost exclusively by him, throughout the entire year. And all of that led to a race that he wanted to win, to be a lawmaker. And I guess I'll just begin by sharing my impressions of actually meeting Will. We spoke for an hour and a half. A nice fellow, not disagreeable to sit down with, but I think that his just diagnosis that he would not let anyone forget about of no actually distressed and put upon workers in this country shouldn't feel bad about anything because actually the economy is really, really good. Man, in all of the postmortems of the most recent national presidential election, a lot is being said of how voters were very tired of being told how everything was good and how economic populism and any mention or attention to workers was kind of ignored by one of the parties entirely and co-opted and used in a gross way by the other party. If Kamala v. Trump was a referendum on Will Stancil, which I don't think anyone is really saying that it was or wasn't, man, his ideas were damaged severely in November. We want you guys to talk about Will and his big election, which we paid less attention to than his tweets that preceded it.
Doesn't that just prove Will Stancil was right and everyone just disagreed with him, though? I also kind of like Will Stancil, and I think he is very sincere and surprisingly ran, which you wouldn't guess from his Twitter and online presence. I thought he ran a really good campaign in terms of his presentation at candidate forums. Like, he comes off as not a politician, but not he's still very eloquent, but like a real person. He presented in at the convention, the DFL convention he was at candidate forums. I thought he did a good job. I just think Katie Jones ran a better campaign. And obviously, the most exciting thing to happen during that campaign, I like to phrase it this way: what happens when someone mails your tweets to thousands of strangers? which is a show I'm writing for Hulu. Somebody, an outside group, paid to mail a postcard with his tweets, I have it on my wall somewhere. I think one of them is about asking someone to drink bleach. And that was fun for me. And he thought I did it. He thought I was responsible for that. I don't have the money to do that, Will Stancil. Someone else did that. Also, who am I to start mailing people's tweets around? I wouldn't do that.
Yeah,
It's my worst nightmare. I can't imagine.
some of the most embarrassing moments of my life, and these are all self-inflicted, has been trying to explain Will Stancil to someone who's just generally offline. And as you do it, you're like, oh no, I'm wasting my life and the precious oxygen by like explaining this online phenomenon, which I guess at least in part was attempted to have been used in the campaign.
His superpower is high volume tweeting, and his greatest weakness is high volume tweeting. He can't resist. He can't resist the trolls. He gets himself into trouble. He has to respond to everything, and he has to get the final word. He has to be right, and you just kind of have to turn off your notifications, especially if you're as big as Will Stancil. He has a national following, which was so surprising to me. And one of the things I learned from your interview, Jay, I think I started to realize how big of a national figure Will Stancil is, and it's kind of astonishing.
Yeah, I also like him personally. I met him multiple times. I was kind of close to the campaign, so I thought he was going to win. I kind of believed everything I was hearing. Yeah, I think he's a nice person, and I think he can be annoying online, but I also kind of give him grace for that because I can also be very annoying online. But I mean, the mailing the tweets thing, just, and he said a lot of those were taken out of context of like longer like threads of tweets. They probably were, and the drink bleach one, and that was like responding to like some Nazi, but it's like, if you're going to run for office, it's kind of dangerous to have that kind of stuff out there.
I remember one of the other tweets that they mailed was in the aftermath of Roe v. Wade being overturned. He took kind of a unpopular and maybe ill-advised stance of like, this won't affect the majority of women. You guys are all freaking out about nothing. This won't affect most women. You're all fine, which I don't think is A, accurate, or B, popular. And I think that's why they picked some of those to mail out as well.
And it was like, I think substantively, it wasn't even about the underlying issue. It was like a communications message he was trying to make. And it like, he came off much worse than I think what he was actually trying to say was.
Yeah.
But he is very obsessed with trying to tell people how they should be communicating about things.
Yeah. He likes to, in the aftermath of his loss, there were a lot of times where I would see him getting quote retweeted by people, and not just people here, but people from all over the country, kind of dunking on him. But one of the things that he kept saying was how he knows how to talk to people because he went out and talked to so many voters during this election. And what stands out to me from that is the lack of self-reflection, that if you can talk to that many voters and feel like you're really connecting with them and understand them and lose by that margin, maybe you're not understanding the communication as well as you think you do. But there's that I think is, out of the Wedge Live group, I think I'm the only one of us who has never spoken with Will Stancil in person. He was at an event that I was at with Taylor, and he came over and talked to Taylor, but like very blatantly stayed on the other side of Taylor, so he didn't have to interact with me.
You're a large person in a hot dog costume. Who's going to talk to you?
I mean,
He loves hot dogs.
Yeah. For him, I was the ghost of failure's future. I've had a couple online interactions with him, and to me, that's the difficulty, is that he really struggles to comprehend that other people can be just as smart as him and just as knowledgeable as him and hold a different viewpoint. And he really struggles to put that together and say, oh, okay, maybe my viewpoint is valid because I look at it from the perspective of someone who has worked in academia and lives in a very nice house in Lowry Hill and things like that. But people who are struggling to buy groceries every week while also trying to keep up a car or transit to work and things like that, maybe they are struggling more than I think they are.
But Jason, the stock market is doing great.
Right. Yeah, if only all of our livelihoods were only dependent on the stock market, things would be booming for all of us right now.
Yeah.
I'll share one tiny behind the scenes detail. After my article came out, I won't retell the headline on mic here, but Will was not a fan of my headline. We'll leave it in the show notes and you guys can read what the headline was. But yeah, understandingly disagreeable about the headline.
I want to be firm about the fact that I said that should be the headline, and I was correct. It was the right choice, and I'm a little happy that he didn't like it.
Wasn't it a quote of his own words?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get the suspense out of here, and we'll read the damn thing on the podcast, even though I went to Catholic school and don't want to. Headline is, quote, "I don't get off on it," end quote. Meet Will Stancil, the man caught in a perpetual Twitter fight.
So it was someone else who went with the annoying headline. I have him calling himself annoying on Twitter.
Could have been the
Well, I think
reformer.
One
Yeah, the
thing, you know,
reformer.
after he, you know, like relatively recently, he was like, quote, retweeting Nazis again. So I'm just like, I don't know if you learned from having your tweets mailed to everybody. Like, you shouldn't,
Yeah.
like, don't expose people to this. Don't, like, you don't need to quote retweet these people and be like, look, there's Nazis on Twitter. Like, we know. You don't need to expose
We
us to
know.
this. Yeah,
You can't win arguments with Nazis. You never can.
right.
And just like you can't win an argument with Will Stancil.
Well, don't compare Will Stancil to Nazis.
Too late.
I'm just saying that they may have some similar rhetorical flourishes.
Shame on you, hot dog Larry Jacobs.
We have a quorum here of liking Will as a person, so we can end on that beautiful positive note. We're at the hour mark right here. Thank you guys so much for coming on the pod. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.